Hello teacher, my name is Juan and this is my video presentation about World War One and literature its influence. So before I start, I want to share a fragment from a book that Ernest Hemingway wrote, that is Men of War. So there was no really good true war book during the entire 4 years of the war. The only true writing that came through during the war was in poetry. So one reason for this is that the poets are not arrested as quickly as prose writers. That is one of the reasons, and this fragment is very deep because it reflects um, all the war. Yes, what happened really. So some of the context about this is that the World War I that happened in 1914 and 1918, there was very foundation of the Western world primarily. So, for example, Great Britain as one of the primary belligerents of the conflict, yes, was no exception, and experienced a wave social and artistic change as a a direct result of the war. So in this case, literature during the World War One reflects upon the bringly citizens, the horror of the war, the changes of the society, the economic shift that occurs in the war, and also some of the writers of that time, yes, feel the need to speak out against all the flaws that they saw in their society. Yes, that is one of the influences that came through the war. So the new style of war allowed the soldiers mm, take some specific amount of time, yes, to ponder all the battle with the fought into the writings. Got it? So in that case, I can see here that the literature served as a fairly accurate gauge concerning all the ideas and the tendencies, yes, of a specific society. So in that case, this altering the face of literature because it changed the way the people thought about life. Yes, this was one of the first influences that this war has on literature. And also the tone of the literature shifted from light-hearted, yes, career storytelling to the bitter remembrances and cynical outlooks of the generation. For example, this fragment that I already read. So there are some specific stages or aspects about literature to lead in the world war. That is one early literature. So we start with patriotism. Some of the poets, yes, and the writers reflects that patriotism. As an example of the writers, for example, was Rupert Brooke, that is one of the representative of the literature after the World War One, and also some poetry development that the First World War One jolt society into the reality of war, as I already said. For example, uh, because poetry dominated literature at this time, with thousands of poems produced regarding the experience that every soldier has had with the war, whether in the trench of the factory or at home, for example. Also, there is another aspect that in poetry, the memoirs and diaries become very popular methods of communicating the reality of war, right? Giving the first-hand accounts of the experience beneath the war, and also these pieces of works now uh, are considered invaluable resources. Yes, as historians delve in the history of the war because of the experience of the law of those people who lived it. Yes, and also there is another aspect that is after on the battlefield. Yes, that experience of the combat soldiers in trenches of the World War One was a constant state of motion because the experience of combat soldiers in this case, soldiers spent a very small maybe percentage of their time in combat, but one day in battle was enough to bring everything together. Got it? And to take this specific experience into the reading, into the writings. Got it? So soldiers has plenty time to think over the reasons why they were in the trenches. So many could find maybe legitimate reason as evidence in the writings. For example, there is a fragment that I have here that said, "Men march sleep." He said, "Many had lost their boots, but limped on, blue shoed, all when lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue." There is some specific influences, yes, that I have here. For example, World War One ended much of the dreams of human progress, and people were bitterly disappointed that technology had economic progress didn't mean social and political progress. Another one is that became a common way for British soldiers to approach the reality of the war, as I already said. Also, as a result of many women begin to speak because they didn't have chance to write about that they write about writing. Yes, so in that case, discussing their view on the war and the impact it was placing on their families. For example, some nurses became writers, yes, and became to narrate all the experiences that they had in the hospitals. Also, I can see here that the World War One ended most of the dreams of the human progress, right? So there are some thematics and trends, as I mentioned before, the literature war expressed patriotism, sadness, horrors, in all the perspectives. But two mainly topics that I can see here that there was the causes I can see maybe, yes, that it was the readings and the writings, was the irony and the soldiers' points of view. The irony because as a protest against governments, laws, and propaganda, yes, and also all the horrors that night in the descriptions of combats and the solitude. There are some specific exponents, yes, to illustrate some specific examples. Much of the literature written during and about the war was authored by men, yes, but as I said before, largely because the conflicts impact on the generation. But some women, yes, also participate in this and became very popular. For example, we have here Vera Baker, yes, Virginia Woolf, yes, among others. And I can see here, for example, that there is some specific requirements that I consider very important to put in here, right, about this, because there's also other, yes, others representative. So in that case, World War One had a huge influence on the way people thought the war, and also impact is clearly visible in the literature of the war, because before the war, people in these countries, yes, trusted in their governments and believed that it was honor to die for one's country. But after that, there was also a wild held view that society was progressive, and the rise of maybe the modern society would bring an end to this specific misery and warfare, and also novelists and poets, sorry, responded to the war by creating works that ponder the deeper meanings and also the effects on men and women. Yes, the writer suggested that men and women had become alienated or maybe distant, and also the post-war writers felt that the modern experience was something altogether new. So these writers were part of the literary movement called modernism, and which was dominant literary for the next 50 years, more or less. Yes. So in that case, literature poses question about all the war and maybe some specific sources that general think about the troop movements and strategy politicians, socialists, yes, liberalism, think about peace, treaties, and social programs. So in that case, I consider that above all else, these novelists and poets force one to consider how people are now retain the humanity in the midst and also the chaos, maybe and horrors, and also these horrible experiences of modern warfare. So that's all, teacher. Thank you so much.